I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I'm joined by Miss Mickey Fitch-Collins. She is a PhD, or she has a PhD, and is not your average leadership skills facilitator. In leadership, with a PhD in leadership in higher education and a career that spans academia, educational technology, and corporate training, Mickey brings a collection of L&D good, bad, and uglies to the table. At Learnit, she specializes in transforming human skills like communication, empathy, and resilience into actionable strategies that drive organizational success from the individual outward. From teaching people to fish literally to helping her peers recover and learn through 9/11 to managing diverse teams across various sectors, her career is a testament to adaptiv- adab- adaptability and authentic leadership. Her speaking and workshops blends I swear, scholarly insight and relatable storytelling with humor and real-world applications. Whether she's telling a story of supervision gone wrong, recommending her latest well-crafted AI prompt, or teeing up a new leadership skill model, Mickey's insights are both profound and practical. She's the kind of guest who doesn't just share ideas, she sparks conversations that linger long after the episode ends. She is also the host of the Learnit Lounge podcast. So, Mickey, thank you so much for coming on. And that intro, for some reason, really was fucking me up. I was like,
It's
I
all
don't
good.
know.
Your mouth is just having a case of the Mondays. No, it's no big deal. I appreciate you having me
Apparently
on the show.
is.
This is going to be great. I'm super excited.
Well, thank you for coming on. Feel free to kind of share with my audience a little bit more about what you do and just kind of share a little bit about what got you into this career.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the well-crafted bio there. But the real story, kind of what I do today is I tell people all the time is my job is to help other people get better at their jobs. So I work for an organization, as you mentioned, Learnit. We're a live learning platform, and what we do is we help upskill people in their day-to-day jobs. And so I facilitate a variety of different, mostly virtual, although right after this, I'm heading out to do some in-person stuff in Pennsylvania. But we do a variety of different workshops, variety of topics. And so I always tell people I spend all day, every day on Zoom with a whole bunch of people that go from being strangers to being friends while we're learning and building skills that are going to help us get better with our work. And the journey that I went on to get here is kind of a different sort of one. And you mentioned some of that stuff in my bio there, but I started out 30 years ago as a teenager in a very odd sort of job, one that I think is pretty hard pressed to find. I've yet to find somebody else that had the same sort of job as me, which I was a professional bass fisherman at the age 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And I grew up in the south side of Chicago, which is not an area, or the south suburbs of Chicago, which is not an area that one would think Professional bass fishing is a part of things. This is much more of a southern United States sort of thing that a lot of people are familiar with. But instead of doing like what the rest of my teen peers were doing on weekends and evenings and stuff, what I was out there doing was teaching people how to fish and working with a variety of different organizations as sponsors and traveling around, giving seminars, being on radio shows, doing TV shows. This was pre the world of podcasts, but that's what got me into public speaking and got me into this place of leadership and learning. And I kind of let go of that when I went into college, because college they want you to be there and want you to be present, and so I had to pick between the two. And through college, I got involved in student leadership, and really, I came to student leadership by the way of some not so good behaviors that I engaged in when I was in college. I was a natural team builder, but outside of some of the policies that existed at the university. And then, as I jokingly like to tell people, as I never left college, I ended up working at a variety of different colleges and universities over the years in a variety of different student service functions. So I was kind of one of those people that was there to help people get across the finish line and help them graduate from college. And then when 2020 happened and pandemic, I was kind of at this place in my life where I realized this is not what I want to be doing anymore. I didn't really feel like I was helping students as much. I felt like I was spending more time kind of fighting with my colleagues for resources than I was doing anything to help students be successful in college. And so I went through this kind of discernment process now about, kind of thinking about what is it that I like and what do I enjoy. And it always came back to speaking and training and developing other people, supervising other people. So it was really natural for me to find my way in the world of corporate learning and development, which is where I've been for the last few years, kind of doing these workshops on the day to day.
Going from professional bass fisher to being in kind of like these leadership type things is a huge change. What was kind of the difficult thing about trying to venture from fishing to being doing leadership work and being in this? Do you still um did you have any kind of changes in career paths during that time, or was it kind of adamant that you wanted to do leadership?
Yeah, yeah, no, it was never something that I was the student leadership in college stuff was never something that was like on my path, in terms of what I thought I was going to do. The professional fishing stuff, I learned, I realize now I learned a ton of different skills from that because I was traveling a bunch. I was having to prepare a bunch of different workshops and seminars that I was giving. I was a teenager that needed to learn how to be eloquent in front of a microphone or in front of a camera. And frankly, my job was to convince mostly men that were 2 or 3 or 4 times my age that they were fishing incorrectly or that they could do it better. And so, those skill sets were really helpful as I continued into, various roles through my career. I think the biggest thing when I moved into college and kind of went into student leadership, and then I went into professional positions in leadership and developing other people. Similar skill sets, but I think obviously the audience is much more. It's about teamwork and less about individual success. In the world of professional bass fishermen, fishing, it's about your individual successes and your individual wins and kind of how you're moving forward and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas in leadership, it's much more team oriented. And so I had to spend more time kind of learning how to integrate myself in other teams and not just try to be the standout person, but rather kind of function as a team member more.
Compared to the work that you did as a student leadership, what's kind of the difference in speaking to more of an adult audience than it is compared to helping college level students or even kind of younger students that are wanting to do leadership? What's kind of the difference in the audience when it comes to your experience in speaking?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the big obvious one is the chronological age difference, right? I mean, if you're talking about when I was doing the fishing stuff, I did a lot of, I did seminars and stuff for adults, but I did a lot of like kids fishing clinics and stuff too, because I was really wanting to get more kids and especially young girls into fishing. And then obviously in college, kind of your traditional age college students, 18 to 24 or so. Now, the work that I do, probably the youngest people that I interact with are in their mid 20s. And I have folks all the way up to retiring in the next couple of years. So somewhere in their 60s, maybe early 70s. So I think one of those pieces is probably like the emotional maturity and emotional intelligence and kind of self-awareness. Um, the hope obviously is as we age that we become more mature and we become more emotionally intelligent and more self-aware of ourselves. So there's that piece. I think the other piece too is, when we're younger people, there are times and situations where we are required to be in spaces, right? Like, we have to go to school, we have to do this. People are telling you, you got to show up at this, you got to be part of this, you got to learn this stuff. And then when you are in the working world, you get to, I mean, you're still told, here's these mandatory things that you need to do, but you have a lot more choice about other things. Like, what sort of skill development do I want to do? To what extent? What sort of, additional skills or certifications or special skills do I want to learn? And so the thing that I really enjoy about my work with Learnit is probably 96% or more of the people are there willingly, voluntarily, right? There's that small percentage of people that are voluntold, is the word I like to use instead of mandatory, right? But most of the people that are coming there are there because they have self-selected, I want to build this skill, I want to enhance this. And that makes all the difference from my perspective as a facilitator, because people are coming with this kind of like, I want to sponge things up and I want to kind of sharpen up my skills rather than, okay, I just need to sit here for 2 hours and just kind of get through this. So that's probably the biggest, probably one of the biggest differences. I think the other big difference is the direct application of skills, right? I mean, I think one of the things that and I remember this when I was a student too, is that you learn stuff and you're like, oh, this is really interesting that I'm learning this, but I can't quite point to where and how I might apply this information or apply this skill, right? Like you're just taking in and you're learning a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas in adulthood, when we're kind of voluntarily coming, especially in the workplace, we're voluntarily coming to a workshop to build a specific skill set, we usually have something in mind of like, well, if I learn this, I can apply it in this setting. Or if I, sharpen up my skills in this setting, it's going to, allow me to do this and that and the other thing at work a little bit better. And so there's a little bit more motivation and a little bit more, intrinsic value to the learning when it comes to adult learners, as opposed to kind of thinking about more of our kind of traditional school age sort of learning.
You had mentioned that you do kind of virtual speaking like this kind of on podcasts and kind of do leadership meetings over Zoom and but you also do in person. Do you feel more of an impact from people that do you feel more of an impact of people that kind of get the message better in person, or do they do kind of better on Zoom? What kind of is it kind of a different vibe when you're talking to people over the phone versus talking to someone in person?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and you're totally right with the word of vibe, right? Like the vibe, it's just you can't really compare the two of the experience of being in person with people and being able to kind of hop around a room and sit with people and watch people in small groups kind of working through something. It is different virtually. I think the thing now, sitting at back end of 2025 here, is I think most people, especially when things, lots of things went virtual 5 years ago, we've all been part of those Zoom meetings, right? That are just awful and poorly facilitated, and the technology is a disaster and all that sort of stuff. And I think in most instances, people have learned what not to do or how to not facilitate meetings and trainings and development opportunities over Zoom. Not everybody, but I think people have upped the experience of what the virtual experience can be like. I know we certainly have at Learnit. I certainly have as an individual as well. But I was just talking with my supervisor the other day of, man, it's just you just can't beat the energy of being in person. And no, you can probably guess from just talking with me, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I'm a people person. I love being with folks. I'm gonna be together in person with one of my favorite clients tomorrow, and I'm just really excited to be around those folks because I live in northern Wisconsin in the middle of the woods. So it's kind of exciting for me to be able to kind of get together with people and do some of the same work that we do virtually, but to be able to actually like literally reach out and touch somebody and kind of help people problem solve kind of shoulder to shoulder as opposed to over Zoom.
From some of the speeches that you've been able to give, what's been some memorable moments across your speaking with audiences? What's been some memorable moments that have really stuck out to you?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you asked that, because I was just talking with somebody earlier today, who asked me to be on their podcast as well, and she said, "You've had some missteps and troubles, right? Like it's not all been like this like glorious path of speaking." I was like, "Oh no, I definitely have had some missteps." Literally, there was a time. This was probably about 15 years ago. I was up on a stage and I'm a pretty animated speaker and I was kind of moving about back and forth on the stage and all this stuff. And, you probably have seen, stages come in sections and they kind of, click those sections together. And I was moving around the stage and I was delivering this. Audience was really into the, stuff that I was talking about, really high participation. I mean, people were clapping and shouting and like all really good stuff. And I was moving across the stage and I tripped over the seam of like the flooring, like the sections that were together. And I fell and I actually twisted my ankle. And it was I could laugh about it now, but it was excruciating. It was awful. And I just I got up and I was like, okay, everybody, like, and I was kind of trying to like hold the tears in. And I'm like, I think I really screwed up my ankle. But I'm just going to sit on the edge of the platform here and we're going to finish this out. We're going to work through this. And I went straight from there to the emergency room and they were like, yep, yeah, you totally twisted your ankle. I was in an ankle brace, like in a walking boot thing for a while and stuff. And I was just like, okay, so whenever somebody says break a leg, they always say that like in terms of performance, break a leg. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, how about twist an ankle? Because I've done that. So there's that. Um, I've also, there's been some times where I have been a little under the weather during some of my speaking stuff, and like, that's gotten pretty bad. Of course, you can't do jobs like I do without having instances where technology totally fails on you, right? Like we always set up all of these backups of, I have my slide deck on thumb drive and I have it visually, and my laptop's fully charged and all this sort of stuff. And there's been times, and this is why I always tell people is like, I never rely on a slide deck for this exact reason is like everything breaks, the projector's broken, whatever. And then you have this like captive group of people that are looking at you like, okay, can you do it? Right. And like, that's one of the real signs of, I think, an incredible public speaker is like the slides are great, but they're not the only thing, right? Like there has to be a story and a message outside of that. The favorite story that I love to share in terms of public speaking was not actually an instance where I was supposed to be a speaker, but this was I want to say about 15 years ago. I was working at a university. I was working in residential life, and so the kind of the college housing and stuff. And we had our new student orientations for the new incoming freshmen for the fall over the summer months. And this summer, this one orientation, we had a tremendous, they call it one of those like 100-year rains, right? Where like just absolute downpour. And it flooded the town like really bad. Infrastructure, I mean, like sewers, everything was flooding, including the university, which had lost power. So we were on some backup generator lights, but we had like, over 100 students and their family there. So it was like, okay, some people could get to the university campus. We didn't have any power. Thankfully, we were in a room that had a lot of natural light coming in. And I had just been out to some of our residence hall buildings, kind of surveying some of the damage. But I knew when I came to work that morning, I was like, this is bad. So I'm going to bring my rain suit with because it was forecasted to continue to rain. And I had one of those rain suits that's like the Gordon's fisherman rain suits, right? Like that, like bright yellow bibs and the coat and the hat and the whole thing. And our chancellor, who was supposed to like deliver the opening welcome, couldn't be there because she was obviously like triaging and kind of working through the crisis of the situation and stuff. And so everybody kind of looked around and was like, who's going to do it? And everybody pointed to me. They were like, Mickey, you do it because like you're a great speaker. The other thing too was because we, had limited power and stuff. They were like, we can't use the microphones and stuff. So we need somebody who can like really project their voice. So I'm like, sure, I'll get up there. And so I got up there in my full rain suit and stuff and did this welcome to this room of, a couple hundred people of like, hey, welcome to the university. We're so excited you're here, all this sort of stuff. And to this day, there's students and families that I met that day, including my wife, that, they talk about that being such a memorable day of like how funny it was of like, oh, here's this person that's like literally standing up on a stage, no lights in this, raincoat, rain suit saying like, welcome to the university. We got everything. We're going to take care of your students. No problem. Certainly not expecting that I was going to be such a big public speaker that particular day, but fun story.
Before you do your speeches, do you have any kind of pre-speech rituals that you do, maybe to help kind of get ready to speak? And have you ever done any speeches where it's been completely improvised?
Yeah, yeah. So I definitely have some kind of pre-speaking things that I do. And it actually came from, I had a number of, when I was working in the college and university environment, I had a number of students that were music majors. And so they talk through kind of all the vocal kind of warm-up exercises that they did to like make sure to kind of stretch your vocal cords and build your lung capacity and stuff. And so I do a lot of the same sort of like singing of chords and like la 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 sort of stuff that like singers might do,
Hmm.
especially if I'm speaking first thing in the morning, when we all have that kind of morning voice that we start the day with, to kind of build up my voice and build up my capacity and my ability to project and stuff. I'm not a person of like superstition or anything like that, but I always tend to, make sure I'm really well hydrated because again, I get really excited when I speak. And so the need to make sure that I'm not only hydrated in my mouth, but the rest of my body so that I have a lot of energy to be able to, conduct, my workshops and stuff is really important. And I think the other thing for me too is I always try to bring humor into each one of my workshops, or seminars that I'm giving or speeches. And so I always try to figure out, something that's happened in the community or something that's happening in terms of news that day or something to kind of warm people up at the beginning of the workshop. Because I think sometimes, even when people are at something voluntarily, there's still that like hesitation of like, is this going to be good? Is this going to be worth it? Right. So like I'm trying to take those first 3 to 4 minutes to really build trust and kind of build affection between me and the audience. Um, so those are a couple of things that I do ahead of time. What was the second part of your question, Noah?
It was a thing of, have you ever improvised any speeches where you didn't have any kind of game plan, and you kind of just walked up there and kind of just gave a speech totally off the top of your head?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's probably more of those instances than actually like the planned speeches. And I think a lot of that, um, based on my personality, I tend to be one of those people that says like, I'll talk about this or I'll share my thoughts or, something like that. And I always try to kind of keep a storytelling framework. Like that's how I find success as kind of doing improv speaking is how can I tell people a story through what I'm trying to say, or like if I'm trying to influence people, or I'm trying to get people to make a decision a certain sort of way, is like how can I tell a story that will highlight the problem or the challenge or the situation, and then bring a solution or bring some type of resolution in there. But storytelling to me is really important, and so I always try to bring that into that improvised speaking. Because I think the problem a lot of folks have with improvised speaking is that they just jump right to the solution and then they try to convince people as to why that works. And I'm like, but people love stories, right? Like we had verbal stories before we ever had written language, and stories is what we make meaning out of, right? Like data is what we make decisions on, but stories are what allow us to make meaning and make connection with other people. So I always try to like use storytelling when I'm doing improvisational speaking.
What seems to be one misconception people get when it comes to public speaking, and how do you kind of help explain and kind of debunk that theory that people tend to have?
Yeah. Um, well, I think one of the misconceptions that people have is that you can only be an expert on one thing, meaning you can only speak on one thing, right? That people just call upon you to talk about one thing. We see that a lot with like some of the really big name speakers, especially like folks that kind of categorize themselves as like motivational speakers, is like they only talk about how to level yourself up after you've had a fall or whatever that is. And I think, I just don't think that's true. I mean, like, none of us is this singular sort of object that only has one story to tell, that only has one message that we can deliver, whatever that might be. I think one of the other misconceptions about public speaking, and I recognize I do fall into this category, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to be a people person and you have to be this big extrovert, this really gregarious, big sort of personality to be a good public speaker. And the truth is, when if I think about the folks that I have seen give different talks or be part of panels, the folks that I think make the most impact for me as a listener or as a receiver of that message are the slower, more quiet, more empathic, introverted sort of individuals. Not the ones that, I like the folks that present like me, but I really, really take a lot of value and a lot of message from the folks that are a little bit more introverted, a lot more pauses, ask really good questions, pose really interesting thoughts to the audience. And I think that goes against people's general thoughts is you have to be this big, crazy person on the stage in order to be a really good speaker. And I just don't think that I just don't think that's accurate. Yeah.
When you're not doing speaking, you do a lot of training and you kind of help train people. What's been some things that people have done in your training that you've seen that is kind of the wrong way of doing it, and what should they have done instead?
Yeah, yeah. I think the wrong way of learning is just memorizing and replicating what the trainer or the facilitator is showing you, right? Copy paste, generally speaking, only works in a computer setting, right? But when we copy and paste as individuals, what we're not doing is we're not individualizing that, we're not personalizing that. And that's where I see a lot of people say, "Oh, well, this didn't work for me." And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you did. Well, I did exactly as you said, A, B, C, D, right? And then usually what I come back is like, well, but you and I don't work in the same type of work environments, or we don't have the same types of teams, or we don't have the same types of customers, or whatever that is. And so copying and pasting my exact, repeating exactly what I said, of course it's not going to work because it's a different environment, or it's different people, or it's a different problem. Um, so I always tell folks is, I mean, I title wise, I call myself a human skills facilitator. I don't call myself a trainer. I don't call myself a teacher, because both of those things implies that the student or the learner is there just to absorb information. But what we know in an adult learning setting is that people are coming with their own information. They're coming with their skills already. And so by telling somebody or by having somebody just copy and repeat something, it's kind of bound for failure. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things is to not you have to make sure to insert yourself in your learning process and insert what is your work environment, what is your context, what is your geographic area, what are the different factors that are at play, because that's the stuff. I mean, it's kind of like it's the difference between repeating, like, I'll give a cooking analogy, right? Of like, if you look at a recipe in a cookbook or on a website, you can repeat it, and chances are pretty good that it's going to come up exactly like the picture or exactly like, what was intended. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to taste that good to you or that it's going to look the way that you wanted it to look or that your friends and family are going to enjoy it, right? And what we end up doing, right, is like, oh, well, I want to add a little bit more spice or I want it to be a little saucier or whatever that might be, right? So what we do is we personalize it to our tastes. That's the same sort of thing that I think about, like when it comes to the next time anybody out there, listens to a podcast or they watch a YouTube video or they take an online course or something like that, is like copying and pasting something is going to get you a limited set of results until you actually personalize and internalize that and figure out, like, what does this mean for me and how do I spice up my own dish, so to speak.
You kind of talk, and I kind of said this in your bio a little bit about 9/11 and kind of how you help people navigate through that. What kind of impact has that day had on you?
Yeah, yeah. So when 9/11 happened, I was just starting my junior year of college, and I had just been hired into a student, like a formalized student leadership position. I had done kind of informal, voluntary student leadership stuff my first couple of years of college. And I was an unlikely hire because I kind of behaved outside. I colored outside the lines a little bit my first couple of years of college. And I was an unlikely hire and a bit of a question mark for the department and stuff. And so there's kind of a lot of pressure on me to color inside the lines, so to speak, and kind of follow the rules and do what I was supposed to do. And my impression, and this was a resident assistant position in the residence halls on campus. So, kind of your person, I was in charge of, about 70 or so college students on a residence hall floor. And we had undergone a couple of weeks of training about, kind of how to influence your peers and how to help people be successful academically and how to help people build relationships and all of this sort of stuff. And the training was great. It was really, really good. The school year started, and a week later, or, kind of the end of the first week of the fall semester was 9/11. And I remember, like everybody who was alive at that time, you remember exactly where you were and stuff. But I remember talking with my supervisor, my hall director, and just saying like, well, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? Right? We have this residence hall that has several hundred people in it. We have this university campus. We had a lot of students that were in the ROTC, and so kind of what's going to happen for those folks that are kind of in secondary National Guard sort of stuff. And the days that followed really it really helped me build this sense of my job wasn't to gather people up for root beer float parties and watch, Packers football games. I mean, that's fun. But what I realized is that true leadership was about helping myself and my peers work through this crazy crisis that was happening in front of us, a thing that nobody ever thought was going to happen. And that came down to one-on-one connections. And not how many people can we get to show up to this program where we do this fun thing, but really like, what am I doing to go door to door and check in with people, see how they're doing, what's going on in their families, how is this affecting their families, right? Because there was all this as days went by. You're realizing that this person had this person who was at the Pentagon. This person knew this person who was in the World Trade Centers. This person knew this person that was out in Pennsylvania, right? And so I really credit a lot of my ability to build one-to-one relationships because of the 9/11 crisis. It completely reframed what I thought effective student leadership looked like, and ultimately, as a grown adult now, what effective leadership. I could care less how many hundreds or thousands of people like something on social media or show up to something or watch something. If there's one person that I was able to reach and connect with and something resonated with them, that is such a huge success to me. And I know that that sounds trite. People say stuff like that. But for me, it comes all the way back to 9/11 of like what I saw in that moment in those following weeks was it's my job and it is my role as a human to figure out how do we human together again and how do we figure out what this looks like, all while being college students who are supposed to be stepping off into this precipice. You're sitting on this precipice of like all the amazing things that are going to happen in the world. And then this happens. So, it changed so much of what my view of what being a true leader looks like.
During your journey, what's been kind of the biggest thing you've learned about leadership, and has you something that you've really learned about yourself?
Whew, I got to think about that one. I think one of the biggest lessons is also probably one of the biggest lessons that I've been taught from one of my mentors, who's still one of my mentors, is to always be thinking about and looking for whatever the next journey is. Not because we're trying to escape the current journey or leave the current job or get out of whatever situation we're in, but to always be thinking about the what's next. And that has really helped me a lot because instead of looking at my life and saying, here are the confines, here are the walls of what I can do and what I can't do, it has really allowed me to be open to say, like, what might I like to do or what could be interesting that I could offer something with, right? My first career of working in higher education, about 20 years. I much of that time before that piece of advice was given to me and before I really internalized that as kind of a leadership philosophy, I always thought, okay, well, this is the next thing that I'm supposed to do. I looked at other people like me and it was like, okay, this is the next job I'm supposed to do, or this is the next sort of place that I'm supposed to work. And I kind of let other people take the wheel, so to speak. And then I got that piece of advice. And at first I kind of thought, oh, well, that's about just looking for your next job. But then what I realized, it's not about looking for your next job. It's about where is your path going to lead you next and where might you want that path to lead next. And that has served me so well. I transitioned out of higher ed proper into educational technology. So I kind of worked in a higher education adjacent technology company for a little bit where I had only the experience. I mean, I shouldn't say only, but I had the experience of only working for brick and mortar institutions. And then I went to an educational technology company where I worked completely virtually with all large online universities. And then I transitioned into the world of learning and development, a place where I had no previous experience, where people, if I had paid attention to those job qualifications of you must have X number of years of experience, blah, 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 that stuff's so bogus, right? Because it's like, well, how do you get experience if you don't have the opportunity to get experience, right? And so I've always kind of taken that and said, my leadership journey is always about looking at what is the next opportunity and where might I want to continue that pathway, or who do I need to meet? I mean, that's a big part of my leadership journey is who am I in network with and kind of what networks and what relationships am I cultivating? Because of probably, let me think through this here, probably almost all of the jobs in the last 10 years that I've had have come from people that I know at those organizations or that people that can make introductions, right? And so I think part of it is like cultivating that network, but I think the other part too is just always kind of looking for like what might that next opportunity look like.
What advice do you have for people that maybe want to pursue a career in leadership and um, want to start doing speeches, but they kind of don't know the first steps? What advice do you have for them of how they can have a really successful career doing leadership and public speaking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest piece of advice, I mean, we have a fantastic amount of free opportunities in front of us in the form of things like LinkedIn and YouTube. Obviously, other social networks, thinking about, Instagram and other places like that, TikTok for sure. But there are a multitude of incredibly successful folks out there that are putting their wisdom out for free or for very low price for people to check out and learn from. I mean, all the time, I'm very active on LinkedIn and I watch a ton of YouTube videos and stuff of some of the folks that I have, gotten a fair amount of inspiration from that have, I've watched their videos and kind of learned and picked up, tricks and tips from them. The thing that's also cool about social networks, and I would include YouTube in that as well, is that most of the folks that are out there as creators, even the highest level of, I mean, top figure speakers and stuff, most of those folks are very willing to write back to a message that you send or connect with you on LinkedIn. I have never had a person say no to like, hey, I'd like to do a little informational interview to learn a little bit more about kind of where you've been and stuff. People are very, and not 100%, but people are very, very generous with their time and their wisdom. And I think that's one of the great equalizers when it comes to social networks and social media is we now have the capacity to reach out and be in network and be in connection with people that we would have only otherwise met had we had $5,000 to buy a ticket to go to fill in the blank big conference where they're a keynote speaker or something like that. Like, people just don't have that, right? But now what we can do is we can start, what I would encourage people to do is, get out on YouTube or, go out to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, start listening to podcasts, start watching videos, start doing some searches for, public speaker or, professional speaker on fill in the blank topic, whatever that topic is, and see who's already out there. Start watching some of their stuff, start noticing kind of who do they speak to, what types of events do they do, what makes them so successful, what really resonates with you. And then you can start folding some of those skills. Again, we don't want to copy paste, but you can start folding some of those skills into how you develop your speaking style. And then you can reach out to those folks too and say, like, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about, like, how do you do this? How do you always have great stories to tell? How do you always know exactly when to take a dramatic pause or something like that? I get a fair amount of those kind of outreach messages on LinkedIn and stuff from folks. And it's always nice because I'm like, yeah, of course I want to share that, because I'm not the originator of this wisdom, right? Like, everything that I do to be successful is because I've seen other people do it and be successful. But that's probably the biggest advice that I would encourage people is, spend some time on social media, really looking at, whatever the topic is that you want to speak on, or topics that you want to speak on. Who are the people that are in those spaces that are really knocking it out of the park and doing really well? And and maybe do some informational interviewing with them of, hey, could I have 20 minutes of your time? Could we hop on a Zoom, 20 minutes of your time? I'd like to ask you to 5 different questions or something. And then, get to know a little bit of their story and kind of how do they do, or why do they do what they do. And then that person's in your network from that point forward. And you never know what that might do for you.
I think it is really important that people kind of have those tips and guidelines there, because it is really important to know that. Um, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge. I think it's really important for a lot of um for leadership to really happen right now. I think a lot of people can find a lot of truth and honesty in that. Um, if people want to connect with you more, and they may have questions about leadership that wasn't covered today, where can they best get in contact with you?
Yeah. There's 2 different things that I'd like to offer to your audience, Noah. The first is connect with me on LinkedIn. So if you are watching this, you will see that there's a QR code up on my screen. That's my LinkedIn. But otherwise, if you just search Mickey Fitch-Collins on LinkedIn, get connected with me, send me a message. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to, hop on a call with anybody to talk more. The other thing that I would like to offer to people is to go to learnit.com. So learnit.com /Mickey, Mickey. There's a couple of different things on there. One is a link to the podcast that I host, which is called the Learnit Lounge. You can check that out. The other thing, too, is for anybody who is part of different teams and organizations that are out there. One of the things that I have as an offer on there is a free 45-day pass, unlimited pass for you and up to 20 of your teammates to be able to kind of check out our services and check out our workshops for 45 days, which is a huge value offer. So I would encourage people to go ahead, learnit.com /Mickey. Yeah, we'll connect from there.
I'll put all of her links in the description box below. I'll put the website, the Learnit website, as well as her LinkedIn down there. So if you would like to get in contact with her and ask her questions, and maybe like to try out the free 45-day training thing, I'll put all that down there for you to be able to have access to. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials as well. Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora, and it's everywhere. So feel free to subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes drop. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. Y'all all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.